The edge of known space was a quiet place. The United Galactic Consensus called it the calm fields. For the species of the consensus, it was a peaceful garden. Their ships were sleek and clean, built for long trips between safe stars. They were advanced, intelligent, and fragile. Far from the calm fields, space was not a garden. It was a jungle. Here, gravity was stronger, radiation was sharper, and planets were wild. This was human space. The ships that moved here were different. They were not sleek. They were angular and thick with heavy armor plates. They were built to take a hit from space debris and keep flying. This was the Terran Soul Defense Fleet, a group of people from a world the consensus secretly called a death world. On the flagship, the unyielding Captain Lee Jun sat in his command chair. He was a man in his 50s with a tired face and calm eyes. He had seen many things. He had seen colonies fail and pirates attack. He had made hard choices. To his right was Commander Park Minji. She was younger, with sharp eyes that missed nothing. She watched the data screens like a hawk. "Another quiet shift, Captain," Minji said. Her voice was soft but clear. "Quiet is good, Minji," Jun replied. He took a sip of bitter coffee. "Quiet means our people are safe. Quiet means no one is screaming for help." They were patrolling the border. Their job was to watch, to be ready. Humanity was new to the galaxy, and the galaxy was a dangerous place. The consensus had welcomed them, but politely. There was fear in that politeness. Humans were strong, fast, and could survive things that would kill a consensus species. They were interesting, but also scary. In a peaceful room on a consensus station, Counselor Vlar watched a star map. Vlar was a being of light and gentle grace. His people had not known war for 1,000 years. He saw the human fleets as little red dots on the edge of the map. He hoped they would stay there. They were so loud, so physical. Their very existence was a disturbance in the calm order of the galaxy. On the bridge of the Unyielding, a quiet alarm sounded. "Captain," said the comms officer, a young man named Kim, "we are picking up a signal. It is very faint. It is not on any standard channel." "Put it through," said June at first. There was only static. Then, a voice broke through. It was not a human voice. It was high, musical, and full of pure terror. The language was unknown, but the meaning was as clear as ice water. It was a scream for help. Behind the voice, they could hear other sounds: the crash of falling structures, sharp weapon fire, and the cries of many beings in pain. Then, a visual flickered on the screen. It showed a beautiful world with purple forests and silver rivers. In the sky above a graceful city, ugly, spike-shaped ships were firing bright green beams. Small, delicate beings with large eyes were running, falling. The image shook and then went dark. The SOS repeated, the terror in the voice deepening. "Origin," June's voice was tight. "Lycian system, Captain," Minji said, her fingers flying over her screen. "It's a protectorate of the United Galactic Consensus. The attackers' biosigns match known profiles. They are Kthrak, slavers, raiders, the worst kind." June knew the type. He had fought their kind before on the fringes of human colonies. "Are the consensus moving?" he asked. Minji opened a separate channel, listening to the public consensus bands. What they heard was not the sound of rescue. It was the sound of debate. Calm, measured voices discussing protocol, jurisdictional boundaries, and diplomatic implications. The nearest consensus fleet was days away at their slow, safe pace. They were talking while the screams continued. Minji looked at June, her face hard. "They're forming a committee. They are debating while people die." On the screen, the brief visual of the Kthrak rounding up the small, deer-like Lycian people played again. June saw a child pulled from its parent. He closed his eyes for a second. He saw not Lycians, but humans. He saw the history of his own species, a history of violence, of being prey, of learning to fight back because no one else would. He opened his eyes. The tiredness was gone, replaced by a cold, clear light. "Navigation," he said, his voice filling the quiet bridge. "Plot a course for the Lycian system." He paused, every officer looking at him. Maximum burn. Ignore consensus routing suggestions. Take us directly through the gravitational shear zone. The helmsman, a woman named Park, blinked. Sir, that path is turbulent. It will be a rough ride. The consensus advises against it because of strain on ship systems. June looked at the fading SOS signal on the main screen. Our ships were built for strain. Our people were built for rough rides. Plot the course. He turned to Minji. Sound general quarters. Wake everyone up. Tell them we have a call to answer. As alarms began to sound through the massive ship, June leaned back in his chair. He watched the stars on the view screen shift as the unyielding turned, its massive engines powering up. Across the comms, the other human ships of the patrol group acknowledged, their own engines lighting up the dark. The United Galactic Consensus heard the scream and saw a problem to be discussed. The fleet of Deathworlders heard it and saw people who needed help. They did not debate. They moved. The unyielding, followed by its smaller, tougher siblings, jumped to faster-than-light speed. They tore through the quiet edge of space, a bolt of thunder in the Consensus's calm garden, heading straight for the sound of the scream. The journey through the gravitational shear zone was like sailing a boat through a storm. The human ships shook and groaned. Lights flickered on the bridge of the unyielding. The crew was strapped in, riding the violent waves in space. They did this because it was the shortest path. Every second saved was a second of life for the people screaming in the dark. On the ship, one person understood those screams better than anyone. His name was Kim Taeyong. He was young, with kind eyes, and he was not human. He was Lycian. Years ago, his exchange program shuttle had malfunctioned near human space. A Terran freighter, risking a lot, had rescued him. He had lived on Earth since then, and now he served as a translator on June's ship. He loved his human friends, but his heart was always with his people on Lycian Prime. When the SOS came, Taeyong felt a cold fear. Now, as the ship raced closer, he stood on the bridge beside Captain June. His small, deer-like frame trembled. His large, dark eyes were fixed on the screen. "The Kthrak?" Taeyong whispered, his voice musical even in fear. "They use weapons that make sound. Terrible sound. It does not hurt ships or buildings. It hurts us. It goes into our minds. It makes our bones feel weak. We cannot run. We cannot think. We can only wait for them to take us." June listened quietly. He looked at the small being beside him, remembering the images of the Lycian people falling, helpless. "We will stop them, Taeyong," he said, his voice low. It was not a grand promise. It was a simple statement of fact. In the Lycian system, the Kthrak raid was almost complete. The drone commander stood on the bridge of its jagged ship, the Reaper. It watched the loading process on the planet below. Hundreds of Lycians, stunned and docile from the sonic disruptors, were being herded into dark cargo holds. They were valuable. They were gentle, smart, and made good servants for certain rich beings in the galaxy's dark corners. "The harvest is good," the drone commander clicked to its second. "This garden was soft. No thorns." Then, a warning sensor chimed. "Commander, unknown vessels entering the system. Fast. Very fast." The drone commander looked at the scan. The ships were like nothing in its database. They were blocky, armored, and radiating strong heat signatures from their hard burn. They were not sleek consensus patrol ships. These were something else. Something that moved through space like a thrown rock. "Identify them," it ordered. "Energy profiles are unfamiliar. Hull composition is dense. They are on a direct intercept course." The drone commander felt a flicker of annoyance, not fear. It had fought consensus security before. Their weapons were light, their tactics were predictable. These newcomers were probably just a tougher kind of the same. It would scare them off. On the unyielding, the main screen showed Lycian Prime growing larger. They could see the Kthrak ships now, like metal insects clinging to the beautiful world. They could see the slave transports, fat and ugly, waiting to leave. A new signal arrived. It was not from the planet. It was from the United Galactic Consensus. Counselor Vlares' dignified face appeared on the screen. He looked deeply concerned. Captain Lee Jun of the Terran vessel, Vlar said, his voice soft and careful. We detect your aggressive approach into a consensus protectorate. We must urge extreme caution. The Kthrak are a volatile species. There are diplomatic channels for this. We are negotiating a solution. On the bridge, Minji's mouth became a thin line. Taeyong made a small, hopeless sound. Jun looked at Vlar's image. He saw no malice, only a profound desire for the problem to go away quietly. Counselor, Jun said, are your diplomatic channels saving the people being loaded onto those slave ships right now?
Valar hesitated.
The situation is complex. A rash action could spark a wider conflict. The Lycians would not want more violence. Jun glanced at Taeyong, whose whole body was shaking with silent tears as he watched his home. I think they would want to live, Jun said quietly. Your doctrine is for a quiet galaxy, Counselor. Ours is for a just one. He gave a small nod to Minji. The communication channel closed. All ships, Jun said, his voice now carrying across the fleet. Battle stations. No weapons fire yet. Show them what we are. The Terran fleet did not attack. Instead, they performed a display of terrifying precision. Their engines flared as they executed a high-G deceleration burn, going from a lightning-fast attack run to a relative stop in a way that would have crushed the bones of any consensus species. Their heavy armor plates, each the size of a building, locked into place with a series of deafening clangs that echoed through the ships. Across their hulls, the protective covers on railgun batteries and missile ports slid back. The low hum of charging capacitors filled the human ships. It was the sound of power being gathered. They arranged themselves in a brutal, simple formation between the Kthrak ships and the path to open space. They were a wall of dark metal, sharp angles, and silent threat on the planet. The sonic disruptors had stopped. The Lycians, beginning to stir from their painful days, looked up. They saw new stars in their sky, hard, angry stars that glowed with engine fire. They did not know what they were, but the Kthrak ships above them had stopped moving. On the bridge of the Reaper, the drone commander watched the scan data. It saw the density of the human hulls. It saw the energy readings from their primitive but massive power plants. It heard the silence from the humans. They were not hailing, not threatening, not negotiating. They were just there, a physical obstacle, a problem that could not be talked away. For the first time, the drone commander felt something unfamiliar. It was not fear of weapons. It was confusion at the message. These beings had not come to debate or to warn. They had simply come to stand in the way. The quiet, imposing wall of Deathworlders had changed the math of the raid. The garden, it realized, had just grown thorns. The silence that fell over Lycian Prime was the quiet of exhaustion, not peace. Smoke rose from the scorched earth where drop pods had landed. In the sky, the last Kthrak raider ships were spinning wrecks or fading dots as they fled into faster-than-light travel. The human ships hung in orbit, dark and battered. Hull plates were blackened from plasma burns. The Dauntless listed slightly, a team of engineers already scrambling outside on tethers to repair the damage. On the surface, the work was medical and messy. Human Marines in damaged armor moved slowly now, their energy spent. They set up portable shelters for the Lycian people. They handed out ration packs, and the humans showed the Lycians how to open them, speaking in soft tones translated by Kim Taeyong. Children huddled close to their parents, but they watched the humans with curious, not fearful eyes. They had seen the giants cry and help. Captain Lee Jun stood in a field, his boots muddy. He had come down in the last shuttle. He looked at the scarred land, at his wounded Marine being loaded onto a medical evac, at the old Lycian elder who was now walking toward him, supported by Taeyong. Before the elder could speak, a new voice came from Jun's wristcom. Captain, consensus vessels have just entered the system. A full relief fleet. They are hailing you. Jun looked at the sky, then back at the elder. He gave a small, tired bow. We must speak with them. Please, come with me. Minutes later, on the bridge of the Unyielding, a hologram appeared. Counselor Vlar stood there, his graceful form surrounded by the clean, bright bridge of his own ship. His expression was one of deep shock. The visual feed showed him the view from the unyielding. The wounded human ship, the scarred planet below, the human and Lycian people working together in the mud. Captain June. Vlar began, his voice softer than ever. We came as swiftly as we could. We expected a war zone. We expected to find you fighting the Kthrak, or perhaps. He trailed off, unable to say, or perhaps ruling over the Lycians yourselves. What do you find, counselor? June asked. He sounded very tired. Vlar looked at the data streams. He saw human medics treating Lycian shock. He saw human engineers helping to put out fires in the Silver Forests. He saw no human weapons pointed at Lycian homes. He saw the old elder standing calmly beside the human captain. I see aid, Vlar finally said, the words seeming to surprise him. We heard the SOS as a disturbance in the order. Problem to be solved. You heard it as a cry for help. June nodded slowly. He looked at Taeyong, then at the elder. On our world, he said, his voice low and clear. If you hear a scream in the night, you run toward it. Not because you are brave, but because you know that one day you might be the one screaming. And you would hope someone would come. The words hung in the air. Vlar was silent for a long time. The simple truth of it was a greater shock than any weapon. It was not a philosophy of conquest or superiority. It was a philosophy of shared fragility. For all their strength, humans knew they could break. That was why they came. The counselor bowed his head, a deep, respectful gesture his species used for great teachers. The consensus has much to learn, he said. We offer our full support. Our doctors, our builders. Thank you, June said. Coordinate with Commander Park Minji. She will tell you what is needed. In the days that followed, the human fleet did not leave. They stayed and worked. Their doctors worked alongside consensus healers. Their engineers, used to building habitats on deadly worlds, worked faster and with simpler tools than the consensus teams, putting up sturdy shelters that would last. On the final day, as the human ships prepared to return to their patrol, the Lycian people gathered. The old elder approached Captain June, holding something. It was a small communication beacon, beautifully carved from a piece of native crystal. It is a gift, Taeyong translated, his own eyes shining. But it is not just for you. It is for all who will listen, the elder explained. The beacon did not send a standard SOS. That signal was one of universal terror, and it had been ignored by those who feared trouble. This new signal was different. It contained a simple image, the unmistakable outline of a human hand, open and gentle, cradling the delicate, hoofed hand of a Lycian. It was a picture of help given and trust received. It is a call, Taeyong said. For neighbors. June took the beacon. He understood. It was not a cry into the dark. It was a message to the dark, saying a light was here. Back on the bridge of the unyielding, heading home, June placed the Lycian beacon into their comms array. He ordered the signal to be broadcast on all channels, repeating, not hidden. Let the galaxy hear it. Far away, in another quiet corner of space, a different threat moved. A mining colony on a small moon was facing a raid from scavengers. They sent out the old, frantic SOS. It vanished into the usual silence. But then, a young comms officer on a Terran patrol vessel, the Steadfast, heard a new signal. He called his captain over. They listened to the quiet, repeating pulse. They saw the image of the hands. Under it, encoded, were coordinates. The coordinates for Lycian Prime. The captain of the Steadfast, a woman named Yun Su, looked at the image for a long moment. She thought of the stories just starting to spread. Stories of a wall of ships that answered a scream. She didn't need to debate. She didn't need a committee. Helm, Captain Yun Su said, pointing to the source of the new signal. A call for neighbors. Plot a course. Maximum burn. And in the dark, another fleet of Deathworlders turned toward the light. The 10 minutes passed in a heavy silence. On the bridge of the unyielding, Captain June watched the timer count down. The Kthrak ships did not move to release the captives. Instead, their energy signatures spiked. Green plasma glowed at their weapon ports. The drone commander had made its choice. Pride and greed had won over reason. All ships, brace for incoming fire, June said, his voice flat. Engage point defense. Return fire at will. Priority, the slave transports. Do not let them jump away. Space above Lycian Prime erupted into light and violence. The Cthrak plasma bolts streaked like green comets. The human point defense guns, designed to shred incoming missiles and space junk, came to life. They filled space with a storm of solid metal. Many plasma bolts were torn apart before they hit. But not all. A bolt hit the side of a human frigate, the Dauntless. It did not melt through instantly. The ship's thick, layered armor glowed white-hot and bubbled, but it held. The ship shuddered but kept firing. The human response was not graceful. Their railguns fired again, not at asteroids now, but at Cthrak ships. There was no melting. When a magnetized slug hit a Cthrak raider, the effect was brutal and simple. The ship did not explode in a ball of fire. It shattered. It came apart like glass, pieces spinning silently into the dark on the surface. In a muddy clearing surrounded by silver trees, the Cthrak had a processing camp. Lycian people huddled together, stunned and scared by the sonic weapons. The Cthrak guards looked up as the sky flashed with strange, new lights. They saw their own ships breaking apart. Confusion spread among them. Then, they heard a new sound. A deep, roaring sound from the sky, growing louder. They looked up. Objects were falling from the clouds, trailing fire and smoke. They were not sleek shuttles. They were Terran drop pods. They hit the ground like meteorites, slamming into the mud with earth-shaking force, forming craters. The hatches blew off. From inside, figures emerged. They were not tall, elegant soldiers. They were humans in heavy, powered armor, making them look like giant metal men. The armor was scratched and painted with personal markings. They moved with a speed that was wrong for their size, a speed born of growing up on a high-gravity world. The fight on the ground was not a beautiful dance. It was ugly and fast. The Cthrak raised their sonic projectors, the weapons that made the Lycians helpless. The sound waves hit the human marines. The armor dampened the worst of it, but inside, Private Kim Sun felt her teeth ache and her vision blur. It was painful, but it did not stop her. She raised her rifle and fired. The solid rounds punched through the brittle Cthrak exoskeletons with wet, cracking sounds. Sergeant Choi Byum-suk led his squad from the front. His voice was calm in his team's helmets. Push forward. Secure the prisoners. Watch the tree line. A Cthrak guard jumped from behind a burning transport, firing a plasma pistol. The bolt hit Byum-suk's shoulder plate. The paint burned off, and the metal underneath glowed red. But it held. Byum-suk didn't even stumble. He turned and fired a short burst. The guard fell. Then, from a central tent, a larger Cthrak officer emerged, surrounded by 4 guards. It raised a heavier, dish-shaped sonic weapon. A high-pitched whine built up, a frequency meant to liquefy nerves. "Sonics!" Byum-suk yelled. "Grenade!" One of his marines pulled a small, cylindrical grenade from his belt, twisted a dial on top, and threw it. It landed at the feet of the Cthrak group. There was no explosion. There was only a deep, subsonic thump that they felt in their stomachs more than heard. The effect on the Lycian prisoners was minimal, a moment of discomfort. The effect on the Cthrak was horrifying. Their rigid bodies began to vibrate violently. Their faceted eyes shattered. They dropped to the ground, their insides turned to mush by their own weapons principle, tuned to their specific biology. The officer's sonic dish cracked and went silent. The fight was over in minutes. The remaining Cthrak broke and ran into the forests. The Marines did not chase them. They turned to the huddled Lycians. The Lycians stared, terrified of these new, violent giants who moved like storms and broke their captors so easily. One old Lycian elder stood protectively in front of the children, its large eyes wide with fear. Then, the humans did something unexpected. With loud hisses of hydraulics, the helmets on their armor retracted. Inside was not a monster's face. It was the sweating, tired, human face of Sergeant Choi Byum-suk. He had a scar on his cheek and kind eyes. He looked at the elder and slowly, carefully, took off his heavy gauntlet. He held up a bare, empty hand. "Taeyong," Byum-suk said into his comms. "Tell them we are friends. Tell them we are here to help." As Taeyong's translated, musical words came from the Marines' external speakers. The humans began to work. They did not stand tall as conquerors. They knelt in the mud. They gave water packs to the crying Lycian children. They used their giant armored hands with impossible gentleness to help the elderly stand. Near the tree line, Private Kim Sun had been hit by a stray plasma burst. It had burned through her armor's leg joint. She was on the ground, her face pale with pain, teeth gritted. Dr. Kong Yuna, who had come down in a later pod, was already there, cutting away the armor to treat the severe burn. Sun was crying, not from fear, but from shock and pain. The old Lycian elder saw this. It saw the giant, terrifying warrior who had shattered its captors now being just a wounded young woman. It saw the doctor's gentle hands working quickly to help. It saw Sergeant Choi, his helmet off, carefully carrying a small, shaking Lycian child back to its sobbing parent. These were not the cool, perfect saviors from stories. They were not angels or demons. They were creatures who had come from a terrible, hard world. They knew what pain was. They knew what fear was. They bled red blood just like others. They had simply chosen, today, to stand between the pain and someone weaker. They were not heroes. They were just neighbors who had answered a scream in the night. The elder's fear began to melt, replaced by a deep, profound understanding, and a gratitude that shook it to its core. The silence that followed the human fleet's arrival was heavy and tense. It was broken by a harsh, clicking sound. The main screen of the unyielding lit up with the image of the Kthrak drone commander. Its insectoid face was all sharp angles and multifaceted eyes. It looked more annoyed than afraid. "Unidentified vessels." The voice came, translated by the ship's computer into a cold, metallic tone. "You trespass in a space claimed by the Kthrak swarm. You will leave. Your ships are primitive. Your weapons are simple kinetics. You have no place here." Captain Lee Jun leaned forward slightly. He showed no anger. He showed no pride. He simply watched. The drone commander continued, its confidence growing. "Perhaps you do not understand what you face. The soft ones of the consensus hide behind shields of light. We melt them." To prove its point, it gave a quick order point. One of the smaller Kthrak raider ships fired a single, bright green plasma bolt. It streaked across the space between the fleets, not aimed at the humans, but at a half-destroyed Lycian communication station floating in high orbit. The plasma struck the delicate station. For a moment, the metal glowed a beautiful, terrible orange, then flowed like liquid, collapsing into a silent, molten blob. It was a clean, terrifying display of heat. "That is power," the drone commander clicked. "That is the end of things. Your metal will boil just the same. Leave now or become debris." On the bridge, Commander Park Minji watched the sensor data. "Plasma temperature is extreme," she said calmly. "Their energy weapons are advanced. Our point defense can intercept some, but not a full barrage." June nodded slowly. He looked at the view screen, at the proud Kthrak commander, and then at the drifting slag that was once a Lycian station. He thought of the scared people on the planet below. He thought of his own ships, built in the shipyards of Mars, tested in the asteroid belt. "Helm," June said, his voice quiet. "Orientation. Bring our main forward railgun to bear. Not on their ships. Target coordinates. The large silicate asteroid in the belt, designation Theta 7. The one with the nickel iron core." The helmsman, Park, looked confused for a second, then entered the commands. "Aye, Captain." "Locked." June opened the channel back to the Kthrak. "You use plasma to melt metal," he said, his tone almost conversational. "We use kinetics to shatter mountains." He paused. "Fire." The unyielding trembled. It was not the tremble of an engine or a reactor. It was a deep, physical jerk, like the ship itself had been punched. From its forward hull, a magnetized projectile, no bigger than a ground car, was launched at a speed that made light seem slow. There was no bright beam, only a brief flash of heat from the launch. Then, nothing. For 3 long seconds, nothing happened. The Kthrak commander stared, its confidence shifting to confusion. Was this a misfire? A trick? Then, in the distant asteroid belt, Theta 7 ceased to exist. One moment it was a 5-kilometer-wide rock. The next, it was an expanding cloud of dust and fragments, lit from within by the flash of the impact. A shock wave of debris began to ripple outwards, a silent volcanic eruption in the vacuum. The energy released was not heat, but pure, raw force. On the bridge, Dr. Kang Yuna, the ship surgeon, had been studying the Kthrak biosign scans. She had not been watching the standoff. She was focused on her medical screens. She spoke without looking up, her voice clinical. Their physiology is interesting. The exoskeleton is rigid, designed for high heat tolerance on their volcanic homeworld. But the internal structure, it's resonant, hollow in places for thermal regulation. She finally glanced at Minji. The sonic disruptors they use on the Lycians? If you turned the frequency to match their internal resonance, it wouldn't just stun them, it would turn their organs to paste. Our standard-issue sonic grenades could likely be tuned to do exactly that. Minji relayed this information quietly to June. He received it with another slow nod. The humans did not fight with beautiful beams of energy. They fought with the crushing gravity of their homeworld, with the shattering force of their history, with tools that turned an enemy's own weapons against them. The silence returned, but it was different now. The Kthrak drone commander was no longer looking at the view screen. Its attention was locked on the sensor data showing the dissolving asteroid. The math had changed again. These were not consensus beings who fought with rules. They fought with the physics of a violent, unforgiving universe. They did not melt you. They did not burn you. They hit you with a piece of a star's core so fast it made you simply cease to be. And now they knew a secret weakness. June broke the silence. His face was still calm, but his eyes were like stone. You have 2 choices, he said to the Kthrak image. Release the Lycian captives, power down your weapons, and leave this system. Or, he paused. You can test which is stronger, your plasma or our will. He leaned back. You have 10 of our minutes to decide. The screen went dark. The humans waited. They did not cheer. They did not celebrate. They watched their instruments, their hands steady on controls. They had not fired a single shot at a living target. But they had spoken in a language the raiders finally understood. The language of utter, complete destruction. The garden had not just grown thorns. It had grown a hammer. The new signal from the Lycian beacon pulsed through the cosmos. It was a quiet, repeating rhythm, a heartbeat in the void. On the Terran patrol vessel Steadfast, Captain Yoon Soo watched the simple image on her screen. A human hand, open and steady, holding a delicate, hoofed Lycian hand. It was an answer to a question the galaxy had not known how to ask. The Steadfast was smaller than the Unyielding, its hull marked by micrometeorite scars. Its crew was young, their eyes bright with the mix of boredom and readiness that came from long patrols. The signal was not a distress call. It was a story, and with the story came coordinates. Origin is verified, Captain, said her comms officer, a man named Lee. Lycian Prime. The data packet includes a public log from the consensus and a tactical after-action report from the Terran Soul Defense Fleet. Yoon Soo read the reports. She saw the cold analysis of the Kthrak weapons. She saw the casualty list from Captain June's crew. She saw the medical notes on Lycian physiology and the recommended aid procedures. It was not a boast of victory. It was a manual, a guide on how to help. It's not just a thank you, Yoon Soo said to her executive officer, a quiet man named Park. It's a forwarding address. They're telling everyone who can hear. If you need this kind of help, we are here. As the Steadfast continued its patrol, the signal did its work. It reached other ears. In a remote star system, a colony ship from a species called the Hreth was failing. Their generation ship was dying, its systems crumbling after centuries of travel. They had sent SOS signals for months into the silent dark. They were preparing for the end, their energy reserves almost gone. A young Hreth technician, her fronds trembling with exhaustion, detected the new pulse. She brought it to her elders. They saw the image of the hands. They saw the attached data, evidence of aid given without condition. With the last of their power, they sent a tight beam transmission not as a general SOS, but directed specifically toward the coordinates embedded in the Lycian signal, toward the community it represented. It was a message not of universal distress, but of specific, desperate hope. The signal was picked up by a Terran listening post on the edge of the asteroid belt. The operator, a woman named Jean, saw it. It was not loud or frantic. It was a polite, precise, and heartbreaking request for assistance, quoting the Lycian signal code. Jean forwarded it immediately to the nearest response fleet. The fleet, fresh from a supply run, changed course without a moment's hesitation. Back on the Steadfast, another call came in. This one was not from a stranger. It was from the United Galactic Consensus. Counselor Vlar himself appeared on the screen. He looked different, less rigid. "Captain Yoon," Vlar said, "we are tracking the propagation of the Lycian signal. It is causing discussion. Great discussion. Is that a problem, Counselor?" Yoon-Soo asked, her tone neutral. "It is a revolution," Vlar said, and there was something like awe in his translated voice. The old SOS was a sound of fear. It triggered protocols, committees. It asked, "Who will fix this problem?" The new signal, it shows an answer. It asks, "Who needs a neighbor?" He paused. "Some in the consensus are afraid. They say you are building an empire of gratitude." Yoon-Soo almost smiled. She thought of the after-action report, of the burned armor and the wounded Marine named Kim. "Sunday empires are expensive, Counselor. They take more than they give. Have you checked the public Terran net traffic? The donations being gathered for Lycian reconstruction? The volunteer engineers signing up for 6-month tours to help rebuild? We are not taking anything. We are giving our time, our blood, and our coffee. That's not an empire. That's a neighborhood watch." Vlar was silent, processing the simple human truth of it. And what if the call comes from a species, unlikable? One with whom you have no common ground? The call from the Lycian system didn't come from someone like us, Yoon-Soo said softly. It came from someone completely different. Came from someone weaker. That was the only common ground we needed. The call ended. The Steadfast sailed on through the quiet dark. But the quiet was different now. It was no longer an empty silence. It was a listening silence. Every human ship, every listening post, was now tuned not just for screams, but for the specific, hopeful pulse of the Lycian signal. They were waiting for the next call for a neighbor in a dim corridor of the failing Hreth generation ship. The elders huddled. Their last message was sent. All they could do was wait. The technician watched her screens, the light of her console the only brightness in the gloom. Then, a new contact alert chimed. A soft, gentle sound. On the screen, 3 blocky, angular shapes resolved from the starfield. They were not sleek. They were scarred and real. A voice, translated into gentle Hreth tones, filled the bridge. "Hreth vessel. This is Captain Im of the Terran supply vessel Granite. We received your message. We have structural engineers, hydroponic specialists, and spare fusion coils. Permission to come alongside and help you fix your home." The old Hreth leader trembled, its fronds moving in a slow, beautiful pattern of disbelief and relief. It was not salvation from a mighty savior. It was a knock on the door from a neighbor with tools. The technician began to cry, not from fear, but from the sheer, simple shock of being heard that on the bridge of the Steadfast, Captain Yoon-Soo watched the report of the Hreth rescue come in. She looked at the Lycian signal, still pulsing steadily on her main screen, the hand holding the hand. The galaxy was still vast and dark and full of danger. But now, in the deepest dark, there were points of light. And from one light to another, a message was passed, in a language stronger than fear. You are not alone. The fleet of Deathworlders was listening, and they were already on their way. The change in the galaxy was slow, quiet, and deep. It was not announced with grand speeches or flashing lights. It spread like the roots of a strong tree, finding cracks in old, cold ground. On a bustling United Galactic Consensus station, Counselor Vlar walked through a newly opened wing. It was called the Neighbor's Gate. It was not a diplomatic office. It was a logistics hub. Here, consensus species could come with a specific problem. They could ask for help from the humans, not as petitioners to a government, but as neighbors asking another neighbor for a tool. Vlar watched as a group of delicate, fern-like beings from a low-gravity world spoke with a human engineer named Choi. The ferns' world was suffering from a creeping silicon-based mold that was choking their forests. Their own science had failed. The human, Choi, listened. He scratched his head. He pulled up data on his tablet about Terran mycological solutions used in Venusian cloud colonies. "We can't promise anything," Choi said, his translated words simple and direct. "But we have some real stubborn fungi of our own. We can try. Might take a few months. You okay with that?" The ferns trembled with relief. They were not being given a solution. They were being offered a partnership in trying. Vlar understood the difference. It was the difference between a transaction and a relationship. Meanwhile, the human fleets did not rest. But their patrol patterns changed subtly. They still guarded their own borders with grim determination. But now they also drifted through consensus protectorates not as guards but as guests. The sight of a heavy Terran warship in a peaceful system no longer caused alarm. Caused a feeling of safety. Children of many species would point at the blocky, armored ships and say, "Look, the neighbors are here." Captain Lee Jun sat in his ready room on the unyielding, now repaired but bearing new, faint scars. Kim Taeyong was with him, preparing to return to Lycian Prime to help his people full-time. "They are calling it the doctrine of the open hand on the news nets," Taeyong said, his musical voice thoughtful. Jun snorted softly. "It's not a doctrine, Taeyong. Doctrines are for strategy. This is just what you do." He looked at the young Lycian. "You are sure about going back? You have a home here on the ship." Taeyong nodded. "My home is with my people. But my family is bigger now. It includes you. That is what the signal means. It does not call us to one place. It ties many places together." He placed a small, carved stone on Jun's desk, a Lycian farewell gift. "When you hear our new signal, you will know we are well. And if you need us, we will hear you too." After Taeyong left, Jun sat alone. He looked at the reports. The Kthrak had not returned. Rumors said they were avoiding systems marked by the strange, dense human ships and the new signal. Bullies, it seemed, did not like neighborhoods where people looked out for each other. But the real story was not in the absence of old threats. It was in the handling of new ones. A stellar flare threatened a binary star system where two different consensus species had mining outposts. Their evacuation plans conflicted, each species prioritizing its own. Panic was starting. Then, the Terran survey ship Vigil, which was mapping the area, arrived. Its captain, a practical woman named Kong, did not take command. She opened a channel to both outposts and simply shared her ship's superior stellar analysis. She showed them the flare's true path and the single, narrow window for safe evacuation. Then she said, "We have extra lifeboat capacity. 40 seats. You decide who needs them most. We will take anyone." Faced with this raw, unfiltered generosity, the two species commanders were shamed into cooperation. They worked out a fair plan in minutes, sharing their own transport space. The Vigil took the sick and the very young from both species. No one asked for payment. The only thing exchanged was thanks and a new, shared understanding. This was the quiet revolution. Humans did not solve every problem. They did not fight every fight. They simply refused to let anyone face the dark alone. They offered tools, a seat in a lifeboat, or just the solid, silent presence of a ship nearby. Their strength was not a weapon to be feared, but a shield to be shared. Years later, on a small moon orbiting a gas giant, a new beacon was unveiled. It was not built by Lycians or humans. It was built by the Hreth, the species whose generation ship had been saved. Their beacon's signal was different again. It showed a hearth frond gently curled around a Terran wrench, and that image cradling a Lycian hand. It was a story of help received and passed on. The galaxy was still vast. It was still often dark and cold. But the darkness was no longer empty. It was threaded with a growing network of quiet, pulsing signals, a constellation of promises. Each signal was a story. Each story ended the same way: we heard you, we came. And somewhere, on a human ship at the edge of everything, a young comms officer would hear a new pulse. She would see a new image, a new story of need. She would call her captain. The captain would look at the stars, then at the simple, powerful symbol on the screen. They would not need to debate. They would not need to form a committee. The course of action was written in their bones, learned on a death world where the only rule that mattered was to help when you hear a cry. Helm, the captain would say, plot a course, maximum burn. And the fleet, the ever-growing, informal fleet of neighbors from a hard world, would turn as one. They would go to work not as heroes but as the people who lived next door. The silence was over. Now the galaxy was full of the sound of answering calls.